All right. I think we're live. Hopefully we're live. Somebody let me know if you can hear me and that we are in fact live. That would be good because sometimes YouTube can be a little glitchy. Um, and then we'll just get after it. So I actually had quite a few questions from the comments. So I'm just going to dive right into those right away. And then as people show up and start asking questions, I will handle them live. So um, let's just get after it. So what are the high carbohydrate diets in your diet? Training or rest day? Which is better? Does it make a difference? So when it comes to like a refeed day, typically I say it doesn't matter too much. I kind of encourage people to just, whatever days you look forward to, do that. So like if you look forward to a Saturday or a Friday or Friday and Saturday, if you're doing a double refeed, then I would just suggest, okay, just do those. If you're looking for what's the most optimal way to do it, then you would probably want to time it around a good training cycle, meaning you want to use that extra glycogen to fuel performance. So especially if there's a day that's like a really challenging day, like if you have a really high rep intense leg day or something like that, then if you're doing a double refeed, I would do it the first refeed before that day and then the second refeed on that day so that you're good and fueled up for that workout. Or if you have like a 3 days in a row of working out, maybe like the first and second days so you get a little bit for each one. But for the most part, it's not really going to matter. And not until are you getting really lean does it make a significant difference. So whatever days you look forward to, but if you want to be like optimal, so to speak, then really challenging days that you need more glycogen for would be ideal. Hey, Kim. Hey, Jamala. If I pronounce your name right. All right, next question until we start getting some live. Is there any type of food that we should avoid on a diet break? Some of the foods I'm having on my break are a half cup of ice cream, small portion of rice, tortilla chips with Mexican dinner. I also want to eat a croissant and a special Italian cookie. I'm trying to be aware of my portions. So, good morning, Holly. There aren't necessarily foods you need to avoid, so to speak. Like I'm all about creating a healthy relationship with food, and that we don't want to look at them as good or bad, and you can certainly include them, especially if you're hitting your numbers. There can be some downsides on certain types of foods, especially if you don't digest them well, or if you are typically eating the same thing over and over and over again, and then you make a drastic change in your diet. You might not digest that food very well, and you might have some discomfort, some GI stress, gassiness, bloating, constipation, or the opposite, things like that. So if you go too far off one direction, you can feel pretty crappy about it. It doesn't mean you can't do it. Doesn't mean it's going to change fat levels, so to speak. But it's something to be aware of. But for the most part, no, there isn't anything you should avoid. Another mistake a lot of people will make too, especially if they're very wary of not eating clean, so to speak, is they'll do a refeed day or a diet break, but they make up all the extra calories through really hard to digest foods, a lot of vegetables and things like that. And that's going to cause a lot of GI stress and a lot of fermentation in the gut, and that can leave you feeling absolutely miserable. So that's something to be aware of as too. All right, what is my opinion on doing intermittent fasting in a calorie deficit? I have no problem with it, and a lot of people like it and think it's valuable, and it helps them stick to the lower calories. So, I mean, that's the main benefit of intermittent fasting. So a lot of people will argue with me, especially if you get the zealots that are just all about IF. For the most part, from what I've seen in research, as long as calories and protein are equated, it doesn't really matter how you spread your meals out. So the value of intermittent fasting is with a shortened eating window, it can be easier to stick to the lower calories. So this helps a lot of people. But there's nothing magic about it. So if you prefer to eat in a more spread out manner throughout the day, that's fine. If you prefer a shorter eating window, that's fine, as long as your numbers are the same. Like myself personally, I kind of eat in an intermittent fasting style just kind of by nature. I don't do it intentionally, but I'm someone who I'm never hungry in the morning. I don't eat in the morning. I've been that way my whole life. So I typically don't eat until lunch, and then I eat dinner, and then I'll eat something before bed. And that's kind of like a roughly 10-ish hour window. So kind of an intermittent fasting approach, but I don't do it intentionally. So it really comes down to what helps you adhere and what you enjoy and can sustain. If your weight goes up and waist goes down, okay, I think I had that in my list. So Priscilla, let me find yours. I know I've got it on here. All right, over 4 weeks of eating a small deficit of 200 calories, weight increased by a pound, but waist reduced by 2 centimeters. Do I need diet adjustments in this scenario, decreases or hold calorie studies? So if your waist is going down, you're in a deficit. So weight is only one tool in the tool belt. It's not the be all end all. If you're losing body fat, then you're in a calorie deficit, and it's why we can't get so caught up in the scale. There could be a lot of reasons for the number to going up. I don't know your starting position and stuff like that, but especially if you're relatively new to training or get on a more optimal training program, you may be building muscle at a fairly fast rate while you lose body fat, and that's fantastic. Whether that's the case here or not, I don't really know. I mean, there's so many reasons why weight goes up and down, especially on a daily basis. But we're just looking for progress. And if you're seeing improvements in body composition, then you're in a calorie deficit and things are good. So I wouldn't make any adjustments in that scenario, and just kind of see if that keeps happening or not. What is the best time to start reverse dieting? I've lost 85 pounds on keto, won the past 20 months, or I have 40 to go. I think there might be some typos in there. So first of all, congratulations on your 85 pounds of weight loss. That's freaking fantastic. If you have 40 more to go, I think it comes down to, one, how well are you adhering to the plan? Two, are you still seeing results? All right, these are kind of the two biggest factors. So if you're mentally okay, physically okay, like not beating into the ground and stuff like that, and you're still seeing progress, then just keep going. Like, great, like keep doing your thing. If you're at a point where you're just feeling really stuck, having a hard time seeing results, if you're mentally just not in it, and having a hard time sticking to the plan, you're feeling really worn down and everything, then it might be time to shift focus here, get into a reverse diet, take a good amount of time. Did you say how long? I think you did. Oh, 20 months. Wow, that's a long time. So yeah, I mean, doesn't mean you can't keep going, but at some point you're going to want to switch phases here and not get so caught up in that end goal you have, so to speak. That's a really long time to be in a calorie deficit for anybody from any starting position. And it would be really valuable to me to take a good period of time. If you're still seeing results, maybe around 6 months, or maybe take the rest of the year, just give yourself a break and, enjoy all the really nice benefits that come from a reverse diet, and then come back and hit it later. If you're stuck, then you might need some more time. There's so many excuse me, I cannot talk this morning. So many variables to keep in mind, but I just don't want you to feel like you need to just pound until you reach your goal. So really, that was my long-winded way of saying reverse when you either can't see results anymore and you can't realistically drop more calories and or do more exercise, or when you're just mentally over it. If you try to push past that, there's too many dangers there, especially mentally. It's just being like, I can't do this anymore, and just going off the deep end. Let's see. I was wondering if I'd gotten a period from my hypothalamic, I can never say that word, amenorrhea, basically losing period. If it would be okay to go on a deficit with maintenance weeks every 3 weeks, would be okay after 4 consecutive cycles, months. Too many. I can't really answer that question. There's too many variables. I don't really know. All I can say is the longer you can wait, the better. And I don't know, your history and stuff like that. But be patient. If you just got it back, I would give it more time. But there's not like a one size fits all answer to that question. I've been waking up after one sleep cycle and feeling starving, no matter how much I eat before going to bed, including higher fat and higher protein. I would still wake up and feel the need to eat. Any tips? It's a difficult one. One thing you could do, protein is by far the most filling macronutrient. And you probably know that's probably why you mentioned protein. And it's very hard to store as body fat too. There's actually some research that looked at when people ate more calories over their usual calories straight from protein, they didn't actually gain any body fat. I mean, it has to go through so many processes to actually be stored as fat. It has such a high thermic effect of food. It's the safest overeat you can possibly have. So, and even protein shakes, like I know it's not as filling because it's just like drinking instead of like chewing and trying to digest it, but it still is it's all protein, and protein significantly reduces the hormone ghrelin, which is the hormone that makes you feel hungry. So one thing you could do is have like a protein shake made just sitting by your bedside. And if you wake up in the middle of the night starving, hit that protein shake, and that might help curb that a little bit. Other than that, yeah, I mean, you pretty much nailed it. It's about having a big meal right before you go to bed and making it high protein. Other than that, I don't know what else to say other than sometimes it'd be like that. Hey, if I diet for 10 months, what's the minimum time to reverse diet? Typically 10 months. Now there's always so many variables, but it's very common to say that we should reverse diet as long as we cut. I think that's mostly comes from bodybuilding case studies, which you're probably not a bodybuilder. I'm making an assumption here. So take that with a grain of salt. But the reason for it is they would track before prep, they would look at hormones and metabolic rate and all that type of stuff. And then they would measure it again at the end of prep, which of course everything would just be tanked. And then they would measure it all the way again post-diet, post-reverse diet. And it usually took about as long as it took for their dieting for the things to reverse again. But that's not going to be the same situation for everybody. And it really depends too, like how much weight do you have to lose? What have you been doing? What's your history look like? Again, as I said recently, the longer the better. We don't want to. The danger of rushing back in too fast is that your body might not respond if it hasn't recovered metabolically yet, and then you just undo all that hard work you did for reverse dieting. So it's always so beneficial to be as patient as possible. So that's why I typically say at least and it's just something I notice in clients too. Like once you get past about the same amount of time, that's when people usually seem to be in a good enough spot to respond. I have not trained for a year. How do I start again? Start dieting or maintenance calories and train? Well, it depends on what your goals are. But the nice thing about having not trained for a year is your body is going to respond really well. And muscle memory is very real. So if you have previously trained, it's going to come back fast. Even if you haven't, your adaptations are going to happen really fast. So, you can try to eat right around quote unquote maintenance and you might see some really nice recomp. But if you want to take it to the next level and eat in the deficit at the same time, you'll build muscle and lose fat at the same time. So you're in a really good spot to do so. It just kind of depends on how aggressive you want to be. Is any surplus of calories over your maintenance considered a bulking phase? Yeah, I mean, it's kind of semantics. I don't personally even like the term bulk. Not that there's anything wrong with it necessarily, but anytime you're in a calorie surplus, you're in a building phase, so to speak. Same thing, like I said, it's kind of semantics. So to optimally build muscle, a calorie surplus is going to help do that. So yes, but it could be called reverse dieting as well. It could be called building phase. But yes, if you're eating over maintenance, then you're going to more optimally build, which would be considered a bulk sort of. Do you track during a diet break, or is that the whole point of a break? Definitely track during a diet break. We don't want to make it some sort of free-for-all. I kind of don't like the term diet break because it does lead to that misconception of it's just kind of like a break from everything, which is not the case. But it's just so widely associated now or widely used. It's not like I can change how it's called. But yeah, you still want to. It's kind of like eating around maintenance or eating around like your normal refeed for a week or more. And you still control it. You allow more flexibility, but yeah, you definitely don't want to. Especially if you're in a really bad spot metabolically. If you go on some sort of free for all, you can add a lot of weight in a hurry. Hey Jake, week 3 into reverse diet, and I'm at 1100 and starting to feel better, but still weak. I've put on 0.1 kilogram in the past 3 weeks, and I think from water weight. And could still be in a deficit as my predicted BMR is approximately 1200. Well, keep in mind too, your BMR isn't your maintenance calories. Your BMR is just how many calories you burn just being alive, so to speak. Like if you were literally to just lay in bed and not move all day long, including blink, that would be your BMR. 2, calculations they can be widely inaccurate. And 3, there's more to calorie burn than your BMR. It's your BMR, it's your thermic effect of food, it's your thermic effect of exercise, it's your activity, your NEAT, your kind of activity throughout the day. So there's a lot of factors. But if you've only gained 0.1 kilograms in 3 weeks, I mean, you're right. That probably is things like glycogen, water weight, things like that. And you should definitely keep increasing, and you should be able to pretty safely, I would assume. So I'm in my 20th week of reverse. I'm doing 5 low days and 2 high days. Do you think I should keep the same calories every day, or does it not matter as long as the average is the same? You can definitely, however you prefer. Once, if you're mentally benefiting from the higher calorie days, if you like to have those days to look forward to, then definitely keep them in. If you get to a point, there's going to be a certain point, and there's a question I have about this that I'll get to, where you're going to stop being hungry and might even have a hard time getting all your calories in. At that point, you're probably better off with a daily approach, and not forcing yourself to eat those higher calories. But really, when it comes down to it, the end of the weekly average, no matter how you kind of spread it out, is what matters the most. So whatever you prefer. I've only want to lose less than 10 pounds. Yeah, but that's a big trap. You got to be careful with that. This is what keeps people stuck. They're constantly always wanting, I only want to lose 5. I only want to lose 2. I just want to lose a little bit. And they're diet all the time. And their metabolism just gets trashed. So you got to be careful with that. I've been reverse dieting for 10 months. Is it okay to start cutting again around 500 calories? I'm 114 pounds, maintaining on 1900 calories. If you mean reducing 500 calories from your 1900 calories, then yeah, you're probably going to be in a good enough place. If you mean go to 500 calories, that's too low. No, don't do that. I have a video called How to Adjust Macros When Cutting, I believe. Search for that under my name, and it'll take you through how to start your diet and how to make adjustments throughout the process. But don't go right to 500 calories. That would be a disaster. Should I keep going at a slower rate, bumping up gradually and tough out the weakness, or bump up a lot to start out? Jake, it's totally up to you, man. Like, it depends on what's most important to you. The faster you increase calories, the faster you're going to feel better, the faster you're going to be able to enjoy more food and, have more energy, recover better, all the really good benefits that come from reverse dieting. But the more likely you are to gain additional body fat during the process. The slower you take it, the less likely you are to gain, but the longer it's going to take to do that stuff. And I can't tell you what's right for you. If I'm eating 2,700 calories and not really training, just yoga, is that considered metabolically healthy? Sure. And I don't know anything about you, but it just, I can't say. I don't know what your genetics are like. I don't know your history. I don't know your height and weight and all that type of stuff. Usually metabolically healthy is more to do with how long you've been out of a deficit than anything else. How long into a stall do you consider dropping your calories more, or during or doing a diet break? I like to wait at least 2 weeks. So we don't want to just go, okay, like I've plateaued for like 1 week isn't even a plateau. Like your weight doesn't just go down linearly. So you want to wait at least 2 weeks before making any adjustments. How do people put on 2 pounds in reverse dieting? I increased 215. I gained 5 pounds, but I feel like it's water. Everyone's different, and there could be a lot of different reasons. And one of the big things too is adherence. A lot of people look at just, okay, these are my targets, but were you really accurately hitting that? Are you just eyeballing portion sizes? Are you having extra bites and nibbles and not accounting for that? Are you having untracked days? And there's so many different things, and where you're at metabolically and everything else. But if you're gaining too fast, then slow down the pace. How do I figure out what my average calories for the week should be? I'm currently eating around 1,250, and I like to eat a bit more on weekends without a major gain on Mondays. So you can just do a little math. So like if you want, like if you're at 1,250 and you want extra calories on the weekends, so say for instance you took away 100 calories 5 days a week, that would give you an extra 500 for those 2 days, or however you want to do it. But whatever your average calories are now, that's what your average calories are. That doesn't make sense, but I think hopefully you know what I'm saying. 0.1 kilograms per week on a high protein diet. That's reasonable. And again, it just comes down to your goals. 8.6 to 0.7 grams protein per pounds, is that okay? Yeah, I mean, it's okay. But again, and there's so many variables. Like there's no just like one size fits all answer to really anything. And it depends on how lean you are, what your goals are, how much you care about muscle, all that type of stuff. Um, if you're obese, then that's probably plenty. If you're leaner, then you might want to up it some. Is it okay to go in a deficit for less than a month to see if my body responds? Will it make me lose my progress? And how to know if your body isn't responding? Well, you'll know if it's not responding because you're not losing weight, not losing size, inches, etc. I mean, that's cut and dry. Is it okay? Possibly, but there's danger. And again, there's too many variables. Yeah, man, just see big picture, Jake. Take your time. You got your whole life ahead of you. Like, don't get so caught up in it, and um, prioritize your health, and always think big picture. Any tips for ladies in menopause taking hormone replacement therapy? Lower calories or lower carbs, or is the same as a normal woman? I'm not entirely sure I understand the question, but I mean, it really comes down to what your maintenance calories are. So the thing with like hormones definitely make a big difference, of course, and they change things, but it doesn't take the calories in versus calories out part of the equation away. It just means that your maintenance calories is probably less than someone who has healthy hormones, so to speak. So you still can find your maintenance calories and make adjustments based off of that. All right, let me come over to some of these other questions. People say you don't need to reverse diet as long as you dieted to see results. Is this true? I kind of tackled that earlier. It can be, but not necessarily. And again, the big risk is if you try to do it too fast, you're going to set yourself back. I think the big thing is like, okay, if you were dieting and you were still responding and doing okay and seeing results, and then you reverse diet out, well, then you were already in a deficit when you reversed out. You're only going to be in a better spot whenever you come back again, so you should be fine. If you've been stalled out for a long time, then you're in a different starting position. Again, I can't stress this enough. There's no one size fits all approach. There's so many variables. There's so many things that I don't know about anybody in particular that can completely and drastically change how that answer would be. This is a really good question. What if you're overweight and have a long history of yo-yo dieting, trying many diets, and now work on a reverse to increase metabolism, but can't afford to gain weight and still looking to lose? How would I go about it? I'm not wanting to maintain, but every time I lower my calories, I gain. So first of all, let me say that this is a common kind of concern, whether somebody is overweight, like very overweight, obese, or even relatively lean. Like nobody wants to gain weight and everyone wants to be leaner. And the drawback is always, well, I don't want to get into an uncomfortable position. I already don't like how I am now. I need to lose first. And it just, again, that can be such a big trap and keep you stuck. And at some point you have to stop and say, hey, I got to think big picture here. Understand that it's temporary and it's for the greater good. Now, it's different for someone who is obese, and especially if they have health concerns. So like, I mean, I'm not qualified to help somebody who has something like diabetes. I would, pass them off to somebody who specializes in it. But if someone does have like type 2 diabetes, I would not be comfortable putting them into a reverse and having them gain from there. That could be irresponsible. We need to focus on health, but at the same time, if you're stuck and can't drop calories, it's kind of like, oh crap, what do you do? It's a kind of a catch-22. But a lot of the times, a lot of the times, it's just because the adherence isn't there, even if you think it is. And I'm not saying this is whoever asked this question, but it's very well documented, and there's even research to support this, that people are really bad about actually consuming what they say they're consuming, and are very, very inaccurate. There was a study that looked at obese people who claimed they couldn't lose weight on 1,200 calories, and when they actually went in and dug through it, they were all on average eating literally 2 times as much as they said they were. Literally 2 times as much. So they said they were eating 1,200. They were averaging 2,400 calories and burning about half as much calories as they claim to be burning as well. And I've seen this a lot too. And sometimes with the clients, when they're really struggling, I'll have that conversation. Say, hey, like, I'm not accusing you. I'm not saying that you're lying to me. But you might not be as accurate as they think you are. Let's take a week and let's just go, okay, like I'm not about perfection. If you watch my videos, you know this. I think it's a big trap. But let's take 1 week, just 1 week. You can do anything for a week and just be perfect. Measure everything to the gram. No extra bites or nibbles or licks or anything else, right? 100% spot on, exact macros, be perfect. And then that week goes by, boom, they see a huge drop on the scale, right? And I had someone recently who kept gaining, and she finally did that and dialed it in more. She's like, holy crap, I'm eating like 750 calories more than I thought I was. Because that stuff adds up. The little stuff adds up really fast. When you're eyeballing stuff, especially if you don't have a good idea of portion sizes, it can add up really fast. So that would always be number one. Like if you're overweight and it might be unhealthy to put on extra weight, dial it in and say, okay, like, am I really having a hard time losing weight, or am I just not sticking to the plan? And be honest with yourself. Now, if you're really just 100% on it and you can't lose, then you might have to go the reverse diet route. But it's a tricky situation for sure. But if you can't realistically lose, then what other option do you have? And when the comment, every time I lower my calories, I gain. Well, you didn't gain weight because you lowered your calories. You probably, what would be more likely to happen is you lowered calories, but had a hard time sticking to it, had binging episodes, and went back and forth a lot and ended up gaining because you slowed your metabolism down, and then you kind of go back and forth, and it just makes it easier to gain weight. But if all things were equal, and then you reduce your calories, you will not gain body fat. It won't happen. What happens is you lower your metabolism and then have overeating episodes, and it makes it easier to gain from that. Oh, it looks like I got a bunch of questions here. Or not. What point should I start adding walks, etc., when I have more energy balanced it out, or wait to settle so I can establish my maintenance? Well, you got to balance what's important to you. Understand that by adding in walking, whatever you do, your body gets used to. And if you do a lot of walking now, whenever you start your cut down the road, that's going to be your like baseline, so to speak. So typically you don't want to increase your walking during a reverse diet if the goal is to eventually cut down the road. If you're just reverse dieting just to try to kind of roughly maintain and live a healthy life, then fine, that's great. But it can be kind of a trap. Like, you don't want to increase your cardio while doing a reverse diet to try to not gain weight. That's counterproductive to what you're trying to do. Hopefully that helps. Can you start your diet on maintenance calories and lower your calories if you're not losing weight? No, because if you're eating your maintenance calories, by definition, you're going to maintain your weight. Your maintenance calories are literally the amount of calories that you consume to maintain your weight. So if you just keep eating maintenance calories, you're just going to keep maintaining your weight. You have to be in a calorie deficit. Thank you. Can we have a workout together? I need to have an inside scoop on pumping iron. At what point would I know weight has settled to start bumping up? If it's glycogen replenishing, how much would that roughly be? If I started at binge restrict at 46.1 and now 1100, I can't say, man. It's too hard to say. Don't get too caught up in this. Like, you're very hyper focused on the weight. Think about all the really good benefits that come from reverse, and just be okay with it, and take time over. Watch the weekly average. More importantly, watch your measurements, watch your body composition, how your clothes are fitting, all that type of stuff. Yeah, and if you're underweight too, then you have more room. Like, I have a video that might be really useful for you, Jake, that I think would be beneficial for your health and your long-term goals. It's called Reverse Dieting to Lean Bulk. Because I think you would benefit from intentionally gaining a little bit of weight. It seems like you're probably pretty undersized and might not be healthy. I can't say for sure. It's just a concern from what I'm reading. I think that might benefit you mentally and physically. doing keto and losing it not in the belly. How can I lose my belly weight? So, um, belly fat is very common to be some of the last fat to go. It's a more common stubborn belly fat or more stubborn fat area, so to speak. Um, Paul Ravella, and I think he got it from, was it Berto? I think Alberto Nunez. Regardless, they have a good metaphor for this. So if you think about like a swimming pool, and if you want to get the water out of the bottom of the, if you have a pail and you're taking water out, if you want the water that's at the bottom of the pool to get out of the pool, you can't get to that before you take everything off the top first, and then you'll eventually get to it. Body fat kind of works in the same way. We all have different spots that are easier and harder to lose. It's different for everybody, but there are some common spots like belly fat. So if you're losing weight, it's you create a calorie deficit. Your body's going to burn fat wherever it wants to. Like you can't spot burn it. You don't have any control over where it's going to go. So if you're losing in other areas, it just means you have to get leaner to eventually get to that belly fat. And this is when it gets more difficult too, because you're going to start having these adaptations and stuff. So it just takes more time in a deficit to get there. I think maybe your thoughts on folks maybe sneaking licks and bites is a true thing. I'm horrible when food prepping. We'll have to pinch cheese or taste. Need to stop doing that and see what happens. Exactly. Like I don't want anybody to feel like they can't, like they 100% of the time, all the time, just always have to be spot on. Like can't ever have anything extra. They need to always weigh everything down to the gram all the time. That would be not a very fun life to live. But if you're really struggling, it's good to dial it in and really get a good look. And you have to kind of teach yourself too. So many people don't want to do it, but it's like if you're just looking at portion sizes and eyeballing it and you don't really have a good idea, I mean, it can add up really quickly. I mean, you think about something like peanut butter, people take a spoonful and think it's a serving, but depending on what that spoonful looks like, it could easily be 2 or 3 servings. And for something that has a pretty calorie dense property to it, that adds up really, really fast. Took me 14 months to lose 30 pounds. I still need to lose 10 pounds, but I'm so over dieting right now. Would you recommend going on a reverse diet and then go on a diet later? Absolutely. 100%. If you're completely over it, don't keep trying to pound it. You have your whole life ahead of you. There's no rush to get there. You know, these 10 pounds aren't going to make a huge difference in your life. Like, I'm not saying you shouldn't try to get them, but you need to be comfortable and be okay with whatever weight you are. That doesn't mean just slap on a bunch of weight, like, because who cares? But it does mean thinking big picture. And at 14 months, I mean, I would personally recommend at least taking the rest of this year and maybe come back at the early part of 2022 before trying to hit it again. But again, as always, the longer you can wait, the better off you're going to be. And it depends too, like if you're still losing at this point or not. But it's going to take time for your body to recover. In part now on higher calories, I feel like binging episodes were due to cycle of restricting too hard and then my body trying to cram in calories to survive. Well, hunger hormones get completely jacked up from dieting. So your signals are all off. So it's literally your body trying to get you to gain weight. Like it wants you to. I mean, it's doing everything it can to try to survive. And if it thinks there's a shortage of calories, then it's going to make these alterations in the body to try to get you to gain some weight back. And that's why your metabolism slows down and you have these the hormones so that you can get back to that body fat set point. So there are some strong hormones and stuff talking to you for sure. If your maintenance is 1600, will you gain weight eating 1650, or will your body have to gain to adapt? So that's the point of the reverse. If your metabolism is suppressed by taking the smaller, like if let's just say for instance you're eating 1600, but your maintenance in theory should be 2000. Well, if you went straight from 1600 to 2000, that's going to be a large calorie surplus for you, and you'll gain weight pretty quick. By making these small adjustments, you might gain a little bit of weight during the process, but it helps minimize it because your body can keep up with these changes better and help get your hormones and metabolism to adapt up to that higher level. I'm 17, 154, 5'7". I have about 14 to 15% body fat and eat 1.25 grams protein per pound of body weight. I still have lower back fat, love handles, and I don't want to lose muscle and get rid of them. Is there any way to get rid of that last layer of fat without losing muscle due to a cut? Sounds like you're already doing it, man. You got to take it slow. I mean, you're always any cut, you're going to lose a little bit of muscle. Like it's unavoidable. We just try to do things that we can to try to minimize it as much as possible. And muscle is very resilient, so it's not like you just lose it like crazy. But to minimize any muscle loss, taking weight loss slow is priority number one. Definitely not more than 1% of your weight on average per week. Less is better. High protein, you're already doing that. Taking consecutive refeed approaches and taking frequent diet breaks are the best things you can do, and then keeping up the training intensity. Yeah, I mean, that's the benefit of protein powder is it helps you get the protein up. So that would be the most logical solution, is to start using protein powder. What would your advice be for a 15-year-old boy, 120 pounds, 5'11", trying to build muscle and gain weight and get stronger? Is protein as important when cutting is, or just more calories? It's still important. You need to have enough protein to create that anabolic response. To build muscle, you have your protein synthesis. That is such a hard word for me to say. Your protein synthesis has to be higher than your protein breakdown, and you need protein to accomplish that. The calorie surplus helps. A higher protein is a little bit more important in a cutting phase just to help preserve it, but it's still very much beneficial. And for the most part, I typically like to try to keep protein the same whether cutting or building for the most part. Very welcome. I work out 4 to 5 days a week. I do 300 minutes working sets a week on average. I'm getting tired. How should I down my weightlifting sessions without hurting my gains? Just 10 minutes less each day sounds more sustainable for me. So if with regards to time in the gym and working sets, it really comes down to rest time between sets. So if you're taking longer rest times, you can take less rest time. Just have to understand you'll be a little bit less strong for each subsequent set because you'll be a little bit more tired, but it helps you get in and out quicker. When you have more rest, you're going to be a little bit stronger and be able to build a little bit more volume, but it's going to take more gym time. So you just have to decide for yourself what's the priority. And other than that, or take a little bit of volume away. Yeah, it just depends. All right, let's get back to some of the other questions. Really appreciate your reverse dieting videos. Oh, you're very welcome. I'm someone that's been yo-yo dieting for years and finally decided it was time to fix my metabolism with a proper reverse diet. I'm a 5'11" male and went on 9-month on and off cut and went from 220 pounds to 170. My macros ended up dipping down to 180 protein, 80 fat, and 80 carbohydrates, 1760 calories at the lowest, as I found that doing a higher fat, lower carb approach was more sustainable for me. I like that last sentence. For reverse dieting, do you recommend that I slowly increase my carbs and calories so that I have more balanced macro ratio? I eventually want to be able to eat more carbs again. I started my cut at 250. Yeah, so you're on 80 fat. That's a very high fat amount for the calories that you're eating. So how I would just start increasing each week based on carbs at that point. So just start doing your increases all through carbs until it gets to a more appropriate ratio. Not that you can't do a higher fat, and like we both said here, and sustainability matters. But now you're going to get your calories up, and you're stating that you want more carbs. And I think it would be beneficial. I find that carbs are more helpful during a reverse than fat, depending on. I mean, not always, but a lot of the times. And yeah, so I would just do that until your fat maybe gets to around maybe 30-ish% of your total calories. And then you can start going between both more. And at a certain point too, you can just not even worry about carbs and fats and just do calories and protein. Let's see. While reverse dieting, how important is it to meet the calories every day? I am struggling to fit all the food I need to eat. I feel like I shouldn't eat if I'm not hungry, but then I wouldn't fully benefit from the reverse if I'm not eating my calories. I guess there are worse problems to have for sure. So this is not abnormal and can be, especially the longer you reverse, the more a lot of people, they start a reverse, especially with a long history of dieting and they've always been hungry. It seems like impossible to get to a point where you'll never be hungry and actually be full and have a hard time eating your calories. But once you've gotten to a point where your hormones have finally stabilized, calories have gotten up, it's very common to be like, oh man, I can't eat any more food. So the first thing you can do, the most common problem for this is we typically look at foods as healthy or unhealthy, right? And we try to eat a large portion of our diet, which is good, from highly nutrient dense foods, whole foods, minimally processed foods. The problem is once you start getting more full, if you're trying to increase your calories by eating more lean proteins, vegetables, hard to digest foods, things that are very filling, it's going to be hard to get your calories up. So at a certain point, you can help this problem by eating less filling foods. And it doesn't mean you need to just eat nothing but ice cream and Pop-Tarts and stuff. Not that you can't include those things, you certainly can, and it would help. But even if you want to try to eat more clean, so to speak, make some substitutions for less filling sources. So like, for instance, instead of brown rice, eat white or jasmine rice. Instead of like whole wheat pasta, you have regular pasta, things like that, instead of sweet potatoes, a regular potato. And that can help, reduce your, I still recommend getting, at least, 2 or 3 servings of vegetables a day. But if you're eating a bunch, get it down to that more reasonable level, and that will help. And then at that point, it kind of, if you do all that and you're still really full and having a hard time, well, then you can just kind of hold. But yeah, you're minimizing the benefit you can get from the reverse by doing that. But it also depends on what your goal is. Like, okay, are you trying to set yourself up for a future cut and have a long ways to go? Are you just trying to get back to a spot where you can be happy and maintain? Because if you're trying to get everything you can out of it, then you want to keep increasing. But if you're just kind of happy where you are and not trying to future cut, well, then just find a spot where you're happy and hold there. You know what I mean? Because you don't want to like be force feeding yourself for the rest of time. So hopefully that was helpful. If reverse dieting and strength training, should I eat less protein on rest days or leave it the same? Leave it the same. The only time I typically would ever reduce protein is if you're doing like a double refeed approach, and I might drop your protein a little bit, usually like 5 to 10 grams, just to allow for more carbs. But for the most part, it just stays the same. Yeah, I think I've got that on my list. But so with reverse dieting, I guess it wouldn't really matter if you're reversing or not. It still remains the same. Should you count fiber from ingredients like Vitafiber and as carb intake in MyFitnessPal, or leave it as long as I track the calories on the nutrition panel? So it's a tricky thing. I typically like to count the carbs. A lot of people will look at like the net carbs, so to speak, and what they do is they don't include the fiber and things like sugar alcohols. And the reason for this is, in theory, they say, well, it kind of comes through undigested, so you don't get any calories from it. But it's not entirely true. So a gram of carbs is 4 calories. Things like fiber, they are often it depends on the source of fiber, but they are converted to short chain fatty acids inside the large intestine, somewhere in the body, and you end up getting calories from that. So instead of 4, it's probably like 2.5-ish or something like that. So you still get calories from it, but it just depends on how strict you want to be with your numbers and how much it bothers you mentally to make these conversions and things like that. If it's going to really put you in a bad spot mentally, then I wouldn't even worry about it. It's not going to make a significant difference. If you're trying to do everything you can to be as accurate as possible and it doesn't bother you, then I would count them as carbs and not go by the actual calorie count on the label. Hey, so maybe I've gone through a bunch of questions. Let me see. I've got 2 more on here, so I don't know if they're yours or not. Otherwise, you'll have to check out the replay. I'll go over the next one here. So I've been reverse dieting since October. I can now maintain at 2,900 calories. What are your thoughts on a mini cut during March consisting of 5 days at 2,000 calories and a 2-day consecutive refeed of 3,000? I wouldn't do your refeed higher than your maintenance calories are now, for one. And for the final 3 to 4 weeks to keep my metabolism unfazed. Love the content. Thank you. You probably could. Again, it always just depends on so many different variables. I don't know your history. I don't know how long you had dieted before that. If you're at a good spot metabolically and you're going to continue a reverse for a long time or a building phase for a long time after, then doing a mini cut like that would be fine. And your numbers seem relatively good. I would probably knock your consecutive refeed down a couple hundred calories. But yeah, I mean, that could be a plan. You wouldn't keep your metabolism unfazed, but it would help. Let's see, trying to get as lean as possible in 2.5 weeks. I'm at 14% body fat now in a calorie deficit at 2,000 a day. Is it possible to get down to 12% in that time, and how aggressive should I go? There's no way I can answer that, man. Like, I'd love to, but well, I shouldn't say that. I don't think you're going to lose 2% of body fat in 2 weeks. I find that unlikely, especially without being way too aggressive and sacrificing lean body mass. But there's always so many different variables. And I just encourage over and over again, be patient. Don't worry about how fast it is. Don't worry about the results. Take it as it comes and be patient. It's just so important. And when we create these expectations too, it can be so mentally defeating. Especially when you have really high expectations like that are hard to meet. It can take good progress and make it look poor because you're so wrapped up in trying to create these fast results. If I typically have a high calorie day on Saturday where I'm above maintenance and hitting, if I typically have a high calorie day on Saturday where I am above maintenance is hitting my 180 grams of protein that I hit every other day as important because I'm not in a deficit. A little bit less important. So carbs are protein sparing. So you don't technically need as much protein on a higher carb day. But again, I still relatively keep it similar. You can knock it back by maybe 10 grams or so, or if you're above the 1 gram per pound mark. So let's just say, for instance, you're 160 pounds and you're eating 180 grams of protein, then maybe on that high calorie day, I would knock it down to like 160, around that 1 gram. But I typically usually keep it the same. But there is some truth to what you're saying, that you don't need as much protein. Thanks, man. Hey, I struggle some days to get that protein in that I'm supposed to eat. I feel better with more carbs, so I fill in with protein shakes. Is that the same as eating meat? Yes, absolutely. So a lot of people are actually afraid of protein shakes and kind of feel like it's cheating, or like they shouldn't do it, or it's bad, or it's not a good source of protein. And it's just not true. And if anything, you could make the argument, as long as the protein is coming from a reputable brand. If you're getting really cheap protein, it's probably cheap for a reason. But a good whey protein is arguably the best source of protein there is out there, because leucine is the main amino acid responsible for muscle protein synthesis. Whey protein has the highest content of leucine of any protein source out there. So if you wanted to make any argument about quality of protein source, you can make the argument that whey protein is the best. Now, I'm not saying that you should just eat nothing but whey protein. I'm just saying don't be afraid of it, and however much you need to consume to reach your numbers, fine. I don't care if it's 2 or 3 shakes a day, like whatever you need to do to get your protein in, great. Don't be afraid of it. Thanks, Christine. I always appreciate your comments. All right, I've got one question left here, and then anything else that comes up, and then we'll call it a day here. With reverse dieting, should you count fiber? Oh, I just took that one, so I guess I am all caught up. You're very welcome. I really enjoy these, so we'll have to do them more frequently. I'll give it another minute or so here if anybody else has any other questions. And other than that, we will call it a day. All right, anything else? I'll close this out. Here we go. Is it super important to meet your calorie goal? Exactly. No. I always leave 20 to 50 calories for missed calculations when measuring food, but sometimes I go 5 to 25 over. Yeah, that's fine. And typically I give ranges too. Like if I'm giving somebody a calorie and protein or even strict macros target, it's an average and a range by the end of the week. It's not about being perfectly on every day. Like if you try to live and die off of singular days, you're going to die. Like it's not going to happen. So you know what? Like give yourself a range. So like, okay, I want to be within 50 calories on average by the end of the week, not okay every single day. I mean, could you do that? Yes, but give yourself a range. Same thing with macros. If you're doing more strict macros, maybe 5 to 10 grams of each macro by the end of the week on average. So your daily numbers can be up and down, but by the end of the week, that average should be within that range, but still not the exact calories and the exact macros. Well, clearly Paul Ravel is my best looking friend. No doubt about that. Hey, buddy. Sorry, one more question. Basically, when I start the reverse diet because I was yo-yoing, I just randomly took 1,000 as a good place to start, or should I have started higher? So what I typically recommend, if you have no clue what your maintenance calories are or what you've been eating, the best thing you can do is just take a week and just continue to eat the same, and then just take that average for the week and see what it looks like. And now you have a rough starting point, especially if you maintain during that time, then you know, okay, this is roughly my maintenance calories. You take that, go from there. But even what you did is not necessarily a bad thing, because nothing's going to be perfect. And you just make adjustments based on how you responded. So if you find that your maintenance calories, like if you go, okay, 1,000 calories is what I'm going to start with. Well, now for the next week, you track things and you see how your body responds. Okay, I'm losing weight. Okay, I can increase a little bit faster, or I'm maintaining. I can take more of a moderate approach, or I'm gaining weight. Maybe I need to stick here for a bit until things settle a little bit more, and then make increases from there. So it's all about seeing how your body responds and making the appropriate adjustments based on that. And that goes for whether you're starting a cut or a reverse, as long as you stick to whatever plan you have, your body's going to give you the feedback you need to be able to make adjustments from there. So we can do some things like the diet recall to get a better idea. But no matter what, it's even if you used like a calorie calculator or anything like that, a TDEE calculator or whatever else, it's just a guess at a starting point, and then you see how things go and go from there. But just because something isn't working doesn't mean that there's anything wrong. It just means now you've got that feedback as long as you're being consistent, and you can go from there. If you've been doing low carb for over 2 years, but now you have hit a wall where you gain and lose the same 10 pounds, what advice would you give? So, Cassandra, there's so many different variables and so much I don't know about you. But I would say if you are having a hard time and constantly gaining and losing the same weight, going through a good long period of staying out of a deficit, going through a reverse, getting your calories up, focusing on some more performance-based goals. Like I always say, enjoying all the many benefits of a reverse, like performance, like having more energy, like enjoying more food, more balance and flexibility in your diet, sleeping better, recovering better, all the really good things that come from being well fed. Spend a good amount of time just not even trying to lose weight. Make sure you're in a good spot metabolically. Make sure you're learning about the process. Make sure you're keeping up your strength training to build some muscle to help throughout this process to set yourself up for a good cut down the road, and then take it from there. But if you just kind of keep trying to do this low carb thing and back and forth, you're just going to not only stay stuck, but probably just keep making things worse. So that's what I've been doing with the 0.1 gram per increase per the last 3 weeks. Would you say to keep going slowly? Yeah, you should just hire me. Again, I can't stress enough. Like, I can't tell you what your goals are and what you're trying to accomplish. And there's that balance between the slower and faster approach. What's best for you, I can't necessarily say. If you find that you're happy with things, if you feel okay and you're able to stick to the plan and everything, then sure, just kind of keep going. But you may want to increase faster. You may find that you feel better, especially if you're really struggling to stick to the plan. The worst mistake that you can make is say, like, I should eat this certain calories, but then you keep blowing it out because you can't realistically stick to it. If that's the case, then don't keep trying to hit a target that you can't realistically hit. Bump up the calories. And in that case, you'll probably end up eating less calories and respond better by having a higher target, because now you're realistically hitting them. Like if you have a 1,000 calorie target, which is pretty low for just about anybody. If you're blowing that out and having huge untracked meals and cheat days, so to speak, and eating tons of calories. Well, if you up your calories by say 300, you might, but because you make that increase, now you feel better. Now you feel like it's a more appropriate amount, and it keeps you more satisfied. You'll actually consume less calories by having the higher target than having a lower target where you just keep blowing it out. I've been reverse dieting and strength training, and although it's hard to accept my new body, I'm feeling so good and seeing a little progress. That's great. I love it. Thanks, Kim. All right. I think that's all I've got. So I'm going to call it a day here. Thank you guys for showing up. And I've got a new video coming out on Monday. So look for that. Other than that, have a great weekend. All right. Thanks. How do you stop this thing?